Hi, I'm Robert Glazer from Ripe Chartered Accountants, and I'd like to welcome today Susie Kaye from your HR partner.
Morning.
Hi Susie.
Morning.
Thanks for coming in.
That's all.
First of all, could you tell me a little bit about what HR partner does, the type of clients you work with?
Yeah, certainly. We are HR and employment law specialists.
Yeah.
So we advise anybody really with employees.
Right.
Our clients range from private sector accountants. We actually even have some law firms, obviously, if they don't do employment law.
Right.
We have IT companies, but we also have charities. Anybody that has staff that needs advice in terms of employment law and how to treat people fairly.
Right.
Really.
And in terms of number of employees?
I'd say it's generally up to about 100 employees. We do have one client which has got 400, but generally it's the smaller companies who don't tend to have an internal HR department.
Right.
They might have an office manager who is dealing with admin and HR among other things,
Yeah.
but they're not an HR specialist, so they want generally some advice.
Okay. So how do you start working with a new client? It must be quite a challenge.
Yeah, I think so. I think what we tend to do is look at what we call the backbone of the employment relationship. So we make sure that their contract of employment and their staff handbook are up to date with employment law. Because if that's not right,
the basics, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes they don't have them at all. In which case, it's really important to put those in place, and we'll draft them for them.
Right.
And if they do have them, then it might be years ago that they were drafted, and employment law's changed quite a bit since then. So we just really update them for them, make sure they've got the key policies, and then really advise them on any kind of issues of poor performance they might have with their staff, or potentially any restructuring they weren't doing, or appraisals, that type of thing, really.
Right, so it's asking a lot of questions and finding out about them.
Exactly, finding out about what the key issues are for them and how we can help.
And where their risk areas are.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
So do all businesses that employ people need to have contracts of employment, employee handbooks?
Yeah. So all organisations that employ people have a legal obligation within 2 months to provide basic terms and conditions for their staff, which can be done just as a list of terms and conditions, or usually as a contract of employment.
Right.
A staff handbook is more of a best practice thing, essentially, because it helps the employer to really have processes around, how they should manage their staff, both in the event of any problems, so things like disciplinaries and grievances, but also, in terms of, maternity rights, statutory rights around flexible working, all those things. It gives them a toolbox of ways to deal with it, really.
And so when businesses take on new individuals to join them, would their letter of offer inviting them to join, would that set out terms and conditions, or should companies do more than that?
Usually people like to see the contract before they actually join. I mean, some companies don't. I have come across a few that don't issue a contract till the first day, but if there's anything in the contract that the individual's not happy with, it's a bit late, really, because they're probably resigned from their previous job. So generally, I would say a nice offer letter that details what the promise is, details what the conditions might be around references, being satisfactory, that type of thing, and then an offer letter, a contract as well, to say these are the terms that you will be employed, and please sign and return a copy of the contract.
And staff handbooks can be quite a bible, can't they? Can be quite a massive document.
Yeah, and we try not to make them too lengthy because otherwise they don't tend to get read. But what we do recommend is that clients put them on their sort of intranet or shared IT drive, so that if they need to make updates, then they can be updated. Because the law does change, it means they don't have to be reissued to staff all the time. They're there as an online resource for people.
And I guess they would refer to appraisals. And what would you advise in respect of appraisals?
Well, best practice with appraisals really is to have at least an annual review of people's performance every year, to actually sort of check in with somebody who's been working for you however long, really, and say, okay, this is how you're doing. It shouldn't be anything that's new. It should be, you should be getting feedback on the job, but it's like a point in time to say, okay, this is what you've achieved. This is fantastic. What would you like to achieve? What your objective is going to be going forward? And ideally, to have a check-in perhaps after 6 months to say, have you achieved those objectives? Where are we going? And ideally, again, to try and tie the objectives into the organisational objectives, so that people feel they're working in line with where the organisation is going.
That sounds a lot like invest in people type philosophy.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's good practice. I think staff appreciate it as well.
What do people typically do wrong in an appraisal?
Sometimes people do all the right stuff in the meeting and they have a really kind of good developmental discussion, and then they never write it up. And it's the paperwork, it's like anything, it doesn't take top priority.
Yeah.
And then there's no record, and so the individual feels a bit aggrieved that they had this discussion, but there's no record of it. And if they do perhaps know that they want to be working towards a certain position in the company, or they have specific training needs, it's not captured. So I think that's the thing, to try and dot the I's and cross the T's.
Okay. And do you provide guidance for 360-degree appraisals?
Yeah, we do. So all the forms we prepare are very much bespoke. So we talk to the organisation and we work out what do they actually need in their appraisal form, rather than just getting something off the internet or whatever.
Right.
We'll design that for them with the right key criteria and the right questions. And then we'll also offer feedback, as you say. So feedback's such a valuable tool.
Sure.
And we do, as you describe, a 360 process. So if people feel a little bit uncomfortable about that, we'll actually facilitate it for them on a confidential basis, enabling people in the organisation to give feedback perhaps on yourself as a director or whoever it might be, in a confidential way, and we can help to kind of relay that back to the individual, giving the whole picture so that it's not sort of biased in any way. Sometimes organisations are happy to do it themselves, they might want the office manager to facilitate it. It really depends.
So I guess certain team members might be a little bit intimidated about appraising their boss.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. But then you get other bosses who are really open to getting that feedback. And it's about, you know, making people feel comfortable to be constructive in their comments.
Yeah, I think I would feel intimidated about being appraised.
Yeah, I understand. I think it's only natural.
Yeah. So, and I guess handbooks would also cover things like disciplinary as well, and performance management, disciplinary, I guess, are very different things.
Yeah, they are. Essentially, performance management is ideally about trying to get somebody to improve their performance. So it's about giving them a fair chance, setting objectives, explaining where they're going wrong. It can also result in an exit from an organisation, because if they don't meet those targets, they've been given a fair chance, they can still get dismissed. But a disciplinary tends to be used more for where there's perhaps a case of misconduct, God forbid someone's sort of stolen or potentially stolen, or had, you know, inappropriate behaviour or damaged the reputation of the organisation. The disciplinary is a sort of 3-4 stage process that enables them to have a chance to have, you know, their explanation heard, have somebody accompany them, but essentially it will be a process of warnings to that individual that if this behaviour continues, they could be dismissed, and it would stand up in an employment tribunal if they were to claim unfair dismissal, for example.
Okay. And in case with gross misconduct, which I understand is automatic dismissal, can that vary from business to business, or is that set?
Usually, it's not an exhaustive list in a disciplinary policy. So it will give some examples of gross misconduct, like, you know, theft, or you know something that anybody would consider outrageous would be likely to be considered gross misconduct. But everything should be, you know, listened to first and considered. And sometimes things that are under the list of gross misconduct might actually be a final written warning, which is to say this was really inappropriate. You know, perhaps it damaged the relationship with clients or the reputation of the company, but it's perhaps not quite serious enough to completely break down that trust between employer and employee. Final written warning, but if it happens again, then it will be dismissal straight away.
You mentioned employment tribunals, which is obviously terrifying. Which is why I guess companies and businesses need to be really careful and know what they're doing with their HR.
Absolutely.
And in the current climate, there's a lot of restructuring and redundancies happening. How should companies go about doing it right? And what's the difference between restructuring and redundancies?
Sure, so a really good question. Essentially, any organisation can restructure, but the law makes sure that people ideally should restructure in a very fair way, and that means that they should consult with their staff. So whatever the length of service, people have a right to be consulted in an organisation to say, look, these are the changes that we're considering making, and this is why. And so unless they're making more than 20 people redundant, they don't have to do what's called collective consultation, where there's everybody together. But we still certainly recommend that they make it very clear what are the business reasons why this organisation needs to restructure, what are the reasons for the new roles, the new posts, and therefore, as a result of that new structure, what are the potential redundancies, who is at risk of redundancy. It doesn't mean someone will definitely end up making those redundancies, because that structure can change through consultation. It's helpful to employees who are affected because they actually feel they understand and they've got an opportunity to comment on the restructure. It may still, however, mean that some roles are at risk, and if that is the case, then people obviously will be told about that, and then the organisation has an obligation to look for suitable alternative employment and try to avoid ways of making redundancies. But you know, it can't always be the case. Sometimes people restructure because of cost, or people restructure because redundancy is defined as like a reduced need for work of a particular kind.
And in a restructuring, it can be positive as well. People might want to take on staff. Do you help with that, the recruitment process?
Yeah, we're not a recruitment consultancy, but we have a lot of experience of recruitment.
Yeah.
So where we tend to get to sort of step in is where they've perhaps had a problem with filling one particular role. They may have had a succession of people that just haven't worked out. They feel that their judgment perhaps may be questionable in this particular case. So we come in and perhaps look through CVs, decide on who to shortlist and actually interview for them or with them sometimes to advise them as to who we think would be good.
Is that often because they're not clear on the job spec or that they don't, or their criteria isn't
it really varies. I think sometimes it's just because they've had bad luck with people. Right. But I think sometimes it's very useful to have an external opinion. Often HR is called in that way. We sometimes get called in to hear appeals and things like that and disciplinaries because you're removed from the organisation, so you can be more objective about it.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit how you work with your clients. Is it a transaction based or is it relationship based where you're kept on a retainer?
Sure. It varies. We do have a lot of retained clients, and the way that our retainer scheme works is it's according to the number of staff people have. They pay a fixed monthly fee, and we essentially give them unlimited HR and employment law advice by telephone and email. Right. If they need lots of documents drafted, then we'll give them a price for those. But generally, as I say, it comes within the unlimited, which people find very useful. Right. However, we will also take clients on just for bespoke projects. They might just want contracts and handbooks, or they might want a specific appraisal program done for them. So it varies.
Okay. And what, apart from the obvious, like companies don't have an employment handbook or they don't give out contracts, what are the signs that we should look for when we're working with our clients to say, right, actually, you need to talk to Susie?
I think if you hear people always complaining about their staff, that either they've got long-standing members of staff that just are not performing and they think, oh no, I don't want to dismiss them because I'll have a tribunal claim against me, that type of thing. Say to them, there are ways to do it fairly. You just really need professional advice about this. Or if they need to restructure, they need to lose costs in the organisation, again, then it's best to do it with guidance in the right way, really. Yeah,
it's a saver in the long run.
I think that's right. I think that's right, exactly. And even if they do face a claim, if they've got followed a fair process, they'll probably win it.
Sure.
So,
and probably some peace of mind too.
Yeah, I think so. Hand holding.
Priceless. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.